The courtroom cameras captured the exact moment when Brandon Matthews made the biggest mistake of his privileged life. There he sat, slouched in the defendant's chair like he was waiting for a latte at Starbucks, his $1,200 iPhone casually placed on the table in front of him, his designer sneakers probably worth more than the elderly man's entire monthly Social Security check. His face carried that unmistakable smirk of someone who had never, not even once in his 18 years of existence, faced real consequences for anything. He had no idea that in exactly 8 minutes and 47 seconds, that same phone, those same texts he thought were private jokes between friends, would become the nuclear weapon that Judge Judy would use to absolutely destroy every shred of his arrogance on national television. What makes this story absolutely insane isn't just that Brandon lost his case. It's not just that he got humiliated in front of millions. What Judge Judy did to this spoiled rich kid was so brutally precise, so devastatingly thorough, that it became the most viral courtroom moment of the entire year. We're talking about a teenager who walked into that courtroom actually planning to mock an elderly accident victim on TV for content, for laughs, for his pathetic social media following. He had posted about it. He had bragged about it. He had told his friends this would be easy money and easy publicity. Brandon Matthews thought he was about to become internet famous for schooling America's toughest judge. Instead, he became the poster child for why you should never, ever underestimate someone who has spent 25 years destroying people exactly like him. Picture this scene. Brandon Mitchell, 18 years old, trust fund kid from Westchester County, strutting into Judge Judy's courtroom wearing a Supreme hoodie that cost $800 and limited edition Jordans that he probably waited in line for, or more likely, paid someone else to wait in line for. His confidence wasn't just high, it was stratospheric. He'd spent 3 weeks preparing what he thought was an airtight case, Googling legal terms, watching YouTube videos about how to win in court, practicing his victim's face in the mirror. He looked at Judge Judy like she was just another authority figure he could manipulate, just another adult who would eventually cave to his lawyer father's pressure and his family's money. He had absolutely no idea that he was walking into a trap that had been carefully set from the moment his case file landed on Judge Judy's desk. The case seemed simple enough on the surface. Just another fender bender, just another insurance dispute, the kind of thing that gets settled in small claims court every single day across America. Brandon had crashed his BMW into an elderly man's parked Honda, and now somehow, through the kind of twisted logic that only extreme privilege can produce, he was suing the victim. Let that sink in for a moment. This teenager had totaled a 73-year-old retired postal worker's only car, fled the scene without leaving any information, and then had the audacity to take that same elderly man to court claiming emotional distress. But what the audience didn't know, what Brandon himself had somehow convinced himself to forget, was that Judge Judy's research team had already obtained his phone records. Every text message. Every Instagram story. Every TikTok video. Every single piece of digital evidence that would prove he wasn't just wrong, he was a liar, a fraud, and someone who thought mocking elderly people was entertainment. Robert Chen sat in the plaintiff's chair, clutching a worn folder full of repair estimates and medical bills, his hands trembling slightly. At 73 years old, this retired postal worker had spent his entire life following rules, respecting authority, and taking care of his family. His 15-year-old Honda Civic wasn't much, but it was his, paid off years ago, maintained meticulously. More importantly, it was his lifeline. His wife was undergoing chemotherapy treatments for cancer, and that car was how he got her to appointments, how he picked up her medications, how they maintained some small shred of independence and dignity in their retirement years. When Brandon's BMW slammed into his parked car at what security cameras would later show was nearly 60 miles per hour in a 25-mile-per-hour zone, it wasn't just property damage. It was the destruction of their mobility, their independence, their peace of mind. And now Robert had to sit across from the kid who did this and listen to him claim to be the victim. Brandon thought this was going to be easy. He had told his friends, posted on social media, even made TikTok videos about his upcoming court appearance. In his mind, this wasn't about justice or responsibility. This was content. This was a chance to show his 12,000 followers how you game the system, how you use money and confidence to win even when you're obviously wrong. He had bragged that Judge Judy was just a TV personality, not a real judge, that the worst thing that could happen was a small settlement his dad would pay without even noticing the money missing. His lawyer father had apparently told him that these TV court shows were toothless, that real consequences didn't apply, that everything was just theater for ratings. Brandon believed every word of it. He had never been more wrong about anything in his entire privileged, consequence-free life. Before we watch this entitled Brat's world completely collapse, you need to hit that subscribe button right now, because what you're about to witness will restore your faith in justice and make you believe that karma doesn't just exist, it has perfect timing and a sense of humor. This isn't just another courtroom case. This is a masterclass in why your digital footprint matters, why disrespecting authority figures who actually earn their position is a fatal mistake, and why thinking you're untouchable makes you the perfect target. The 8 minutes that destroyed Brandon Matthews are coming up, and trust me, every single second is more satisfying than the last. Judge Judy had seen thousands of cases walk through her courtroom doors over her legendary career, but within the first 30 seconds of reviewing Brandon Matthews' file, every single one of her finely tuned alarm bells started ringing. The discrepancies in his story weren't just small inconsistencies, they were glaring contradictions that screamed of someone who had gotten so comfortable lying that he'd forgotten to keep his lies straight. An 18-year-old claiming emotional distress from an accident he caused. Insurance companies on both sides refusing to process claims because the stories didn't match the evidence. Security camera footage that supposedly showed one thing while police reports documented something completely different. And then there were the social media posts, the ones Brandon had hastily deleted but forgotten that the internet never really forgets anything. Judge Judy's team had screenshots of everything, and they had spent the previous evening building a timeline that would systematically dismantle every single claim this spoiled teenager planned to make. The courtroom buzzed with its usual energy as cameras rolled and the audience settled into their seats, expecting another routine case that would be wrapped up in 15 minutes with Judge Judy's signature no-nonsense efficiency. Production assistants made their final sound checks. The bailiff took his position by the door. Nobody in that room, except perhaps Judge Judy herself, had any idea they were about to witness the kind of courtroom destruction that would be replayed and analyzed for years to come. Brandon strutted through those double doors like he was walking into his high school cafeteria where everyone knew his name and his family's money bought him respect he hadn't earned. His $1,000 sneakers squeaked against the polished floor. His designer hoodie hung just right, carefully styled to look casual while actually being meticulously calculated. He shot a confident glance at the cameras, already imagining the clips he'd post later with captions about how he'd handled his business like a boss. Behind him, trying to maintain some dignity while clearly uncomfortable with their son's attitude, sat Brandon's parents. His father, a corporate lawyer who had spent Brandon's entire childhood teaching him that rules applied to other people, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His mother, who had made a career of making excuses for her son's behavior, clutched her designer purse and avoided eye contact with anyone in the courtroom. They had enabled this monster, funded his lifestyle, cleaned up his messes, and convinced themselves that protecting him from consequences was good parenting. Today, they were about to discover what their parenting approach had actually created. Robert Chen sat quietly in the plaintiff section, looking small and fragile next to Brandon's obvious wealth and confidence. His suit was outdated but clean, probably the same one he'd worn to his retirement party years ago. His hands trembled slightly as he organized his paperwork, photographs of his destroyed Honda, medical appointment schedules for his wife, repair estimates that exceeded the car's total value. He looked like a man who had already accepted defeat, who had learned through life that people with money usually won regardless of who was right. Judge Judy entered the courtroom with her characteristic brisk efficiency, and everyone rose out of respect. Everyone except Brandon, who took an extra 2 seconds, making a show of slowly standing while checking his phone one last time. It was a small act of disrespect, barely noticeable, but Judge Judy noticed everything. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she took her seat, that predatory assessment that regular viewers recognized as the calm before an incoming storm. She opened the case file, already knowing every detail inside, but using the moment to let tension build in the room. Brandon misread this silence as uncertainty, as a judge who was still trying to figure out his brilliant defense strategy. He had no idea she was simply deciding exactly how to destroy him for maximum educational impact. The opening statements began with Robert Chen's trembling voice describing the accident. He spoke simply, honestly, without embellishment or drama. He explained that he had been inside the grocery store, shopping for his wife's specific dietary needs during chemotherapy, when he heard the crash. By the time he got outside, the BMW was already speeding away. His car, his beloved Honda that he had maintained so carefully for 15 years, was completely totaled. The front end was destroyed, the frame was bent, and the mechanic had taken one look and declared it a total loss. Robert's voice cracked slightly as he explained that without a car, getting his wife to her cancer treatments meant relying on neighbors, on charity, on the kindness of strangers. For a man who had spent his entire life being self-sufficient, this dependence was almost as painful as the financial loss. Brandon barely looked at Robert during this testimony. Instead, he was reviewing his notes, his prepared statement full of legal terms he'd copied from internet forums. When Judge Judy asked him to present his side, he stood up with theatrical confidence and launched into what he clearly thought was a devastating counter-argument. He claimed that Robert's car had been parked illegally, jutting out into the street, creating a hazard for drivers. He claimed that the emotional trauma of the accident, the damage to his expensive BMW, and the stress of being falsely accused had caused him severe psychological distress. He threw around terms like contributory negligence and assumption of risk with the confidence of someone who had spent maybe 20 minutes on a legal website. His voice carried that particular tone of condescension that comes from someone who has never been told no, never been challenged, never faced someone smarter than him. Judge Judy listened to this performance with the patience of a chess master watching an amateur make predictable moves. She let him talk, let him dig his hole deeper, let him commit to his version of events with absolute certainty. Every few sentences, she'd ask a clarifying question that seemed innocent but was actually laying groundwork for what was coming. Where exactly were you driving from? What time did this happen? Did you stop to check on the other vehicle? Did you leave any information? Brandon answered each question with increasing confidence, clearly believing he was educating this television judge about how the real world worked. His answers were smooth, practiced, and almost entirely fabricated. Then came the moment that would change everything. Judge Judy leaned forward slightly, her expression shifting from neutral observation to something far more dangerous, and asked the question that would begin Brandon's complete unraveling. Mr. Matthews, do you frequently text while driving? Brandon barely hesitated, shrugging with the casual dismissiveness of someone discussing what he had for breakfast. Sometimes, Your Honor. I mean, everyone does it. It's not a big deal if you're careful. The courtroom went slightly quieter, that instinctive hush that happens when people sense something significant is about to occur. Judge Judy's eyebrows raised just a fraction of an inch, and anyone who had watched her show for any length of time knew that expression meant someone was about to have a very bad day. And do you text about your accidents, Mr. Matthews? Do you share the details of your vehicular incidents with your friends? Brandon's confident expression flickered for just a moment, confusion crossing his face. I don't understand what you're asking, Your Honor. What does that have to do with anything? Judge Judy reached down beside her bench and lifted a thick manila folder, the kind that suggested extensive documentation and research. The movement was deliberate, almost theatrical, and Brandon's eyes followed the folder with the first hint of genuine concern crossing his previously smug features. Mr. Matthews, when you filed this lawsuit, you opened yourself up to discovery. My team subpoenaed your phone records, your text messages, your social media posts, and everything you thought was private between you and your friends. The color began draining from Brandon's face as the implications of what she was saying started penetrating his wall of arrogance. He glanced back at his parents, whose expressions had shifted from uncomfortable to horrified. His father, the lawyer who should have known better, looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. Your Honor, that's an invasion of privacy. You can't just go through someone's personal phone. Brandon's voice had risen in pitch, losing its earlier confidence and taking on the whining quality of a child whose toy had been taken away. Judge Judy's response was ice-cold and absolutely devastating. Mr. Matthews, you committed fraud, fled the scene of an accident, and then sued your victim. Your privacy concerns became irrelevant the moment you decided to lie under oath in my courtroom. And I'm about to show you and everyone watching exactly what kind of person you really are. She opened the folder with deliberate slowness, and the audience leaned forward collectively, sensing that something explosive was about to happen. Brandon's lawyer, a young associate his father had sent to babysit this supposedly easy case, was frantically flipping through his own notes, clearly unprepared for this turn of events. Robert Chen, who had looked defeated just moments ago, raised his head with the first glimmer of hope crossing his weathered features. Judge Judy pulled out the first printed text message, enlarged for the cameras and the courtroom to see clearly. This text was sent from your phone at 3:47 p.m. on the day of the accident, approximately 10 minutes before you crashed into Mr. Chen's vehicle. It was sent to your friend Tyler Morrison. I'll read it for the court. About to see how fast this BMW can go on Maple Street. She paused, letting the words hang in the air like an accusation. Maple Street, Mr. Matthews. That's the exact street where you crashed into Mr. Chen's parked Honda at what security cameras measured as 58 miles per hour in a 25-mile-per-hour zone. Brandon's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, his prepared excuses evaporating in the face of his own written words. That was a joke, Your Honor. I wasn't being serious. I was just messing around with my friend. His voice had lost all its earlier bravado, replaced by the desperate tone of someone watching their carefully constructed lies collapse in real time. Judge Judy wasn't finished, not even close. She pulled out the second text message, this one even more damaging than the first. This message was sent 30 seconds after the accident. Same recipient. LMO just smashed into some old dude's car. It's totaled, ha ha ha. The courtroom erupted in gasps and murmurs of disbelief. The audience members who had been sitting quietly were now visibly angry, their faces showing the kind of disgust reserved for truly reprehensible behavior. Robert Chen's hands gripped the edge of his chair, his eyes filling with tears as he heard the casual cruelty with which this teenager had discussed destroying his livelihood. Brandon was shaking his head frantically, his hands raised as if he could physically stop the words from existing. That's out of context. You don't understand. I was in shock. People say stupid things when they're in shock. But his protests sounded hollow even to his own ears, desperate excuses that couldn't explain away the gleeful tone of his own messages. The third text message was the one that transformed the case from a simple accident dispute into something far more sinister. Judge Judy's voice took on an edge of genuine anger as she read it aloud. 2 minutes after the crash, while Mr. Chen was standing in the grocery store parking lot looking at his destroyed car, you sent this message. Didn't leave a note. Old man was still in the store, lol. Let his insurance deal with it. The audience reaction was immediate and visceral. Someone actually shouted, "Oh my God," before catching themselves. Others shook their heads in disbelief. The bailiff had to take a step forward to quiet the rising voices. This wasn't just negligence or carelessness anymore. This was deliberate, calculated, criminal behavior documented in the perpetrator's own words. Brandon's face had gone from pale to absolutely ashen, his earlier confidence completely evaporated and replaced by the dawning realization that he had created a permanent record of his own crimes. Judge Judy wasn't showing mercy, and the audience didn't want her to. You fled the scene of an accident, Mr. Matthews. You laughed about destroying an elderly man's car. You deliberately avoided taking responsibility. And you documented all of it in writing. Her words landed like hammer blows, each one driving home the severity of what he had done. But Judge Judy was just getting started, and what came next would prove that Brandon's casual cruelty went far deeper than just a hit-and-run accident. She pulled out another printed text message, this one sent the day after the crash, and the recipient's name made Brandon's father visibly flinch in his seat. This message was sent to your father, Mr. Matthews. The same father sitting behind you right now, the lawyer who should have taught you about ethics and accountability. Let me read what you wrote to him. Dad, crashed the car. Old Honda looks cheap. Can you call insurance and say he hit me? He probably won't even fight it. The implications of this text were staggering, and the courtroom fell into absolute silence as people processed what they had just heard. This wasn't just a teenager making bad decisions in the moment. This was premeditated fraud, conspiracy to file a false insurance claim, and it directly implicated his father in the scheme. Brandon's lawyer actually stood up, his face panicked, trying to interject some kind of objection, but Judge Judy silenced him with a single raised hand and a look that could have frozen lava. Brandon was frantically shaking his head, his voice rising to a near shriek as desperation took hold. I was panicking. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't thinking clearly. My dad didn't even respond to that text. But his protests only made things worse, because Judge Judy had already anticipated this defense and had the response ready. Actually, Mr. Matthews, your father did respond. He texted back, let me make some calls. And then, mysteriously, your insurance company received a claim stating that Mr. Chen's vehicle had backed into yours while you were legally parked. A claim that security footage proved was completely fabricated. Brandon's father stood up abruptly, his face red, and walked out of the courtroom without a word, unable to face the exposure of his own complicity in his son's fraud. His mother remained seated, crying silently into her hands, finally understanding the monster she had helped create by always making excuses, always protecting him from consequences, always choosing comfort over accountability. The fifth text message Judge Judy revealed was somehow even worse than the previous ones, because it showed premeditation and mockery of the judicial system itself. This message was sent 1 week ago to a group chat containing 5 of your friends. I'll read it exactly as you wrote it. Court with Judge Judy today. Gonna make this old man look stupid on TV. Easy win, easy money. Might go viral LOL. The audience's reaction was explosive, with several people shouting their disapproval before the bailiff had to call for order. Brandon had come into this courtroom planning to humiliate Robert Chen on national television, planning to turn an elderly man's suffering into entertainment, planning to use Judge Judy's platform to mock someone who had done absolutely nothing wrong. The sheer callousness of it, the calculated cruelty, the complete lack of empathy for another human being's pain, it painted a picture of someone who viewed other people as props in his personal reality show. Brandon had completely broken down at this point, his carefully styled hair disheveled from running his shaking hands through it repeatedly, his expensive designer clothes suddenly looking like a costume that no longer fit the character he was trying to play. His voice came out in gasping sobs as he tried one more desperate defense. Your Honor, please, those texts, they don't mean anything. I was just talking trash with my friends. Everyone says stuff they don't mean. I'm only 18. I made mistakes. You can't use private conversations against me like this. But Judge Judy's expression showed absolutely no sympathy, only the cold satisfaction of someone who had methodically built an airtight case and was now watching it crush exactly the person who deserved to be crushed. Mr. Matthews, these aren't just private conversations. These are confessions. These are evidence of fraud, conspiracy, hit and run, and a complete lack of human decency. You didn't make mistakes. You made choices. And now you're going to face the consequences of those choices. But Judge Judy had saved the most devastating piece of evidence for last, the nuclear option that would completely obliterate any remaining shred of defense Brandon thought he had. She pulled out one final text message, this one sent just yesterday, less than 24 hours before they all walked into this courtroom. This message was sent to your mother. Don't worry Mom, I've got this. Judge is just a TV personality. She can't do anything real. Dad's lawyer said worst case we settle for like $2,000. That's nothing. Judge Judy looked up from the paper and stared directly at Brandon with an intensity that made him physically recoil in his chair. Would you like to revise your assessment of what I can do, Mr. Matthews? Because I'm about to show you exactly how real my authority is, and exactly how much $2,000 means compared to what you're about to pay. The revelation didn't end with the text messages, because Judge Judy's team had been thorough in ways that Brandon's privilege-addled brain couldn't have imagined. She pulled out printed screenshots from Brandon's social media accounts, posts he had deleted thinking they had disappeared into the digital void, not understanding that screenshots are forever and deleted content can always be recovered. Your Instagram story from the day of the accident, posted at 4:15 p.m. and deleted 3 hours later. Crazy day LOL, with a photo of your damaged BMW, smiling like you just had an adventure instead of committing a felony. Another screenshot appeared. Your TikTok video, posted that evening and deleted the next morning after your father probably told you to scrub your social media. The caption read, when you total someone's car but you're rich so it doesn't matter, with you literally dancing in front of your damaged vehicle. Each piece of evidence was another nail in the coffin of Brandon's defense, another example of his sociopathic lack of empathy, another demonstration that this wasn't a good kid who made one mistake but rather someone who had been raised to believe that money and privilege exempted him from basic human decency. Brandon was openly weeping now, his face buried in his hands, his shoulders shaking with sobs that might have been genuine remorse but more likely were simply the shock of finally, for the first time in his privileged life, facing real consequences that his parents' money couldn't make disappear. His lawyer had given up trying to mount any defense and sat silently, probably already composing his resignation from Brandon's father's firm. Robert Chen sat quietly watching this meltdown, tears streaming down his own face, but his were tears of relief and vindication after months of being made to feel like he was somehow wrong for expecting basic accountability from the person who had destroyed his car and his peace of mind. Judge Judy allowed the weight of all that evidence to settle over the courtroom for a long, heavy moment before she delivered her ruling. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had presided over 20,000 cases and had seen every variety of human behavior, but this case had clearly struck a particular nerve. Mr. Matthews, in 25 years of jurisprudence, I have seen liars, cheats, and criminals of every variety walk through my courtroom. But you represent something particularly toxic in our society. You represent what happens when privilege meets cruelty, when enablement meets entitlement, when parents choose comfort over character. You didn't just commit a crime. You celebrated it. You documented it. You planned to profit from it. And worst of all, you felt absolutely no remorse for the pain you caused an innocent elderly man whose only crime was parking his car on a public street. Her words landed with the force of a legal sledgehammer, and Brandon could only sit there and absorb the verbal destruction, his earlier arrogance now seeming like it had belonged to a completely different person. The financial judgment came first, and it was far more severe than Brandon had imagined possible. I am ruling in favor of the plaintiff, Mr. Robert Chen, in the amount of $15,000. This includes the full replacement value of his destroyed vehicle, compensation for 3 months of alternative transportation costs, reimbursement for the medical appointments his wife missed due to lack of transportation, and punitive damages for the emotional distress caused by your harassment through this frivolous lawsuit. You will also pay all court costs and Mr. Chen's legal fees. Brandon's face went even paler as the numbers registered. $15,000. Not the $2,000 nuisance settlement his father had promised would be the worst-case scenario. Not a slap on the wrist that could be paid and forgotten. This was real money, serious consequences, the kind of judgment that would actually hurt even a trust fund kid's finances. But Judge Judy wasn't finished with the financial destruction. Additionally, I am ordering that these funds be paid within 30 days, and if you fail to pay, I will personally ensure that collection proceedings begin immediately, including potential garnishment of your trust fund. The legal consequences that followed were even more devastating than the financial penalty, because they had implications that would follow Brandon for years beyond this courtroom. Judge Judy's expression was granite hard as she delivered the next part of her ruling. I am forwarding all of these text messages, social media posts, and evidence of conspiracy to the district attorney's office. You have confessed in writing to multiple crimes including hit and run, insurance fraud, filing a false police report, and conspiracy to commit fraud. These are not civil matters, Mr. Matthews. These are criminal charges that carry potential jail time, probation, and a permanent criminal record that will follow you for the rest of your life. Brandon's lawyer finally found his voice, standing up with shaking hands to try one last desperate intervention. Your Honor, my client is only 18 years old. Surely we can consider that he's young and made poor choices without ruining his entire future. But Judge Judy shut him down immediately with a response that would be quoted in legal circles for years. Counselor, your client is old enough to drive a car at deadly speeds, old enough to commit premeditated fraud, and old enough to mock an elderly cancer patient for entertainment. He's old enough to face adult consequences. Judge Judy then did something she rarely did in her courtroom. She addressed Robert Chen directly with genuine compassion in her voice. Mr. Chen, I want to apologize to you on behalf of a justice system that allowed this to go on as long as it did. Your dignity throughout this ordeal has been remarkable. You came here asking only for what was fair, only for what you were owed, and instead you were subjected to further harassment and cruelty. I hope this judgment gives you some measure of justice and helps restore your faith that accountability still exists. Robert nodded, unable to speak through his tears, but his expression showed the relief of a man who had been carrying an impossible weight and finally felt it lifted. The audience broke into spontaneous applause, and Judge Judy allowed it for several seconds before bringing down her gavel with a sharp crack that echoed through the courtroom. Judgment for the plaintiff in the amount of $15,000. Case dismissed. Mr. Matthews, I suggest you use this experience to become a better person, though frankly I'm not optimistic about your chances. The aftermath of the case was swift, brutal, and exactly what Brandon deserved. Within hours of the episode airing, the video had exploded across every social media platform. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Reddit, every corner of the internet was sharing clips of Brandon's texts being read aloud, his breakdown, his complete destruction at the hands of Judge Judy. The hashtag started trending immediately. Justice served. Texts destroyed him. Entitled Brat gets owned. Judge Judy wins. Within 48 hours, the video had accumulated over 50 million views, making it one of the most viral courtroom moments in television history. Brandon's carefully curated social media presence, the 12,000 followers he had been so proud of, vanished overnight as he deleted or privatized every account. But the internet had already taken screenshots of everything, archived every post, saved every video. His digital footprint would haunt him forever. The legal consequences materialized faster than anyone expected. The district attorney, facing public pressure from the viral video and armed with an airtight case built on Brandon's own confessions, filed criminal charges within 72 hours. Insurance fraud, a felony carrying up to 5 years in prison. Hit and run, a misdemeanor with mandatory license suspension. Filing a false police report, another misdemeanor. Suddenly Brandon was facing not just financial penalties but real jail time, probation, community service, and a criminal record that would impact every job application, every college admission, every background check for the rest of his life. His father, implicated in the conspiracy by his own text response, faced investigation by the State Bar Association and potential disbarment proceedings.